no construction, there were three options. One was to do an interbasin transfer, one was MWRA, one was desalinization. At that time, the city had spent untold amounts of dollars on investigating other water sources. The MWRA was not popular with the public. The interbasin transfer was not going to be allowed by the environmental groups. So desalinization became the way to go. The company came in and was willing to front all the costs and the fees, and what would happen is the city would be its client. So Bill will tell you that I was on the council and I voted for it, and he's right, I did. I did vote for it. I've never hidden and I've never run from that. I voted for it because to not vote for it meant that the city would not prosper, it would not move forward, there would not be any development. It is a problem now. Many of us felt at that time that we would have, with the growth of Southeastern Mass, that there would be customers. I still think someday there will be customers, that Southeastern Mass is not going to stay stagnant, it's going to continue to grow. People move here, people have children, it continues to grow, and at some point in time I believe that water will be useful. The only way in which I think that we could ever reduce that would be if at any point in time that if the plant, to purchase the plant at a much reduced rate and at a rate that would be less than what we are currently paying them now. That is the only way that I see to reduce that, and I don't know if that will ever happen.
Okay, Mr. Carpenter, you have 1 minute on this question.
Well, Morgan, your newspaper actually quoted the mayor last spring as saying it is what it is regarding the contract. What I believe is that if I were mayor and I was losing $6 million a year of the taxpayers' hard-earned money, I'd be fighting like hell to try to do something about it. I would not accept any answer. I would keep trying. So what I would do as mayor is I would legally challenge the contract because I believe Aquaria LLC has failed to perform under two key provisions in that contract. They did not spend $250,000 on marketing in the first 3 years. They have not aggressively marketed the water to other customers, public and private, as the contract requires them to do. Challenge the contract. You got no problem blowing $1 million on the electric plant. Let's challenge the $6 million a year that we're losing on the water plant. Number two, I would challenge the plant to see if they can produce the water that they actually say they can produce. I would turn Silver Lake way down. I would order 4 or 5 million gallons a day from Aquaria for 60 consecutive days, and let's see if that plant can really do what they say it can do. We've never asked them to do that. I understand it costs you a little bit of money, but for losing $6 million a year, I think the risk outweighs the reward.
You have 1 minute.
The reward outweighs the risk.
We actually have called for water. We called for it in 2010. We've called for some in 2011. We continue to call for it. For me to discuss our strategy as to calling for it and how we are looking at issues of the contract would be foolish for me to do in public, because then I would be negotiating with Aquaria in public. But only to say that we have looked at all those options and we have called for water previously, and we continue to look at all of our options in that way. But if you read the contract, you will see that there are a number of caveats when you call for water, on demand for water, what their responsibility is in terms of meeting the water. But again, you have to read the contract fully to understand that that's all there.
Okay. Morgan or members of the panel, a follow-up question to the candidates on this issue.
Yeah, the city is still under a binding agreement with the state to have several million gallons of water available as reserves. If either of you were to avoid the contract, where would you find that excess water?
Either candidate can take this one.
Oh, okay. Well, I think that challenging the contract legally, the contract provides for mitigation. So we can seek relief under the contract. I don't know that those two clauses, I'm not an attorney, but attorneys have told me probably not enough to void the contract, but it could be enough to devalue the contract, and we could seek relief from them. I want to see, I'm going to test, we have drawn some small amounts of water sporadically. I want to challenge the production capability of that plant, order a substantial amount of water over a 60-day period to see if they can produce the volumes of water that they say that that plant can produce. And I'm pleased to hear that after 4 years, the mayor is now looking at our options as to what we can do with that contract.
Mayor Belzotti, you have 1 minute.
Bill, we look at options all the time. We've looked at options for the last 4 years. That hasn't been in the last year. So in terms of where we would get excess water, that's a good question. I guess we would have to look to see what our options were with Silver Lake or other options. But right now, we have that. We have the plant. We have the resources that are available to us. So that is what we can use and what we have. But again, Bill talks about water revenues and drawing water and calling for water. But what he doesn't tell you is that all the water rate payers are going to have to pay for that too. It doesn't come for free when you call for it. And that's not cheap either. And the water rates in the city have not been raised since 2008. And to make a big call like that would cost ratepayers money. So that's, again, what he's not telling you as part of his plan is that it's still going to cost you money.
Actually, I did say that the reward would outweigh the risk. That's what I was referring
Okay.
to. We would invest some money one
We started
time.
another round, 1 minute and 1 minute on this same question then. Go ahead.
Okay. So what I said was that that the reward would outweigh the risk. I understand we would have to spend some money to challenge it. However, at losing $6 million a year for water we don't need and don't use, I believe it would be wise to make that investment one time to see if that plant can do what they say it can do. If that plant does it, and it does do what it say it can do, then I would open up negotiations to try to purchase it. And I understand the mayor says it costs too much money. Well, the way negotiations work is the seller asks high, the buyer offers low, and you see if you can strike a deal in the middle. We ought to at least enter into the negotiations to see if it can be purchased for a favorable price, because if we could purchase it for the area that I believe it could be purchased, we're looking at an annual bond payment of $3 to $3.5 million per year. I'd rather own it for $3.5 million per year than rent it for $6 million per year if it's been tested and shown that it can produce the water they say it can produce.
Okay, the final word, 1 minute, Mayor Belzotti, on this question.
Right now, the price that the current owners want would not even come close to what you are suggesting. You could not even get near there. The cost is far beyond that. They are not looking to give the plant away, and they are looking to recoup some of their costs. So it's not anywhere near something that could be bonded for $3 or $3.5 million. That's not even close.
Okay. Are you finished, Mayor Belzotti?
I am finished.
Okay. Let's take like in school, stretch, or college. We are at Massasoit. I trust the audience here feels the candidates are getting into the issues. Yes? I know the panel does. I know I do, and I hope the audience who'll be watching at home feels the same way. Now, we're not done yet. We're moving on to round 3, ladies and gentlemen. That was not a signal.
It's not an intermission.
Huh? Not an
It's not an
intermission.
intermission.
Yeah.
We're going to move on to round 3 of our questions. If I could have quiet, please, to go to round 3. Please.
Here's your pal.
I think we're all doing fine, by the way. Round 3, we have Monique Alomar with a question for Mr. Carpenter. He has 2 minutes to respond. So, Monique?
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Carpenter. You haven't said this directly or spoken to this directly, but the 2-year mayoral term appears to present certain challenges for any candidate, whether it is the incumbent mayor or someone as yourself, Mr. Carpenter. How would you provide stable leadership and implement sustainable change with the challenge of the 2-year term, where basically every 2 years your job's on the line, as is the job of everybody in your administration? So how would you approach that?
Well, Monique, I think there was actually 2 questions in there, so I'll try to answer it in 2 parts. First of all, I would go to work on November 6th preparing for January. I would not be waiting for January. So we would have already had 2 months' worth of work laying the groundwork to be ready to hit the ground running on January 2nd. In terms of the 2-year term, I think it's something that does need to be revisited. I would think that we should be considering a 3-year term. Department heads are appointed for 3 years. I think it would make a lot more sense to have a 3-year mayoral term with the 3-year appointments of department heads running concurrently, so that each time the mayor is elected, they would have the opportunity to make decisions on individual department heads as to whether they want to reappoint that person or they want to bring in someone new. Because you're right, a mayor comes in with only a 2-year term. There are people there with department heads with existing terms. In that first term, it does hinder a new mayor from making changes. I'll let it go at that.
Mayor Belzotti, you have 1 minute.
Well, since I have done this, come into office, you really don't even have 2 years. Your first term, you really have maybe about 13 months, if you're lucky, before you really have to start thinking about re-election. But I think that we have provided very stable leadership over the last 4 years, and I'm very proud of the work that we've done. And we've worked very hard, and we're going to continue to do that in another 2 years. In terms of the 4-year term, the city had it at one time. They had it for a brief period of time. The voters decided that they no longer wanted it. They rescinded it. I think that if, in fact, people do have an interest in a 4-year term, I believe it has to come from the community. It has to be it's a question that has to be on the ballot, and the interest has to come from the community. Because I don't think, whether it's Bill or myself, that we should be the ones that are championing it. It's about what the community wants for itself, because ultimately they're going to be the individuals that vote on it. Do I think it is a good or bad idea? I think it's probably a good idea, but I think it has to come from the community.
And 1 minute, Mr. Carpenter.
Well, I think the mayor, when you look at this issue of the department head terms running and the mayor's term, first of all, I would not appoint a department head or give a department head an employment agreement that did not include a residency requirement. I believe all these department heads should be living in the city. Mayor Balzotti chose to give the chief of police a contract that does not require him to live in the city. I don't believe the BRA director lives in the city either. And the mayor sat next to a superintendent of schools for 3 years who brought his $200,000 paycheck home to Roslindale every night. When the school committee called a public hearing to talk to the superintendent about his compliance with his residency language, Mayor Balzotti did not even attend that hearing. So I think it's important to try to get the department heads' terms running concurrently with the mayor's term, so that when the mayor comes into office with all these expectations, the mayor has a chance to choose their own team.
Okay, time is up.
Do I have the ability to respond to that? No?
Monique, I didn't say no yet. Monique, do you have a follow-up on that yourself?
No, I
Okay.
do not.
Okay.
The chair will allow a follow-up of 1 minute from each candidate on this one time, 1 minute on this one.
The residency law is being followed as the ordinance is written. In terms of the police chief, he is grandfathered. He was hired before the date. Other department heads can be hired that live outside the city as long as they move in within 1 year. We are following the residency ordinance. I have always said that I support residency, and we are following the residency ordinance.
Ms.
Well,
Carpenter.
You've
have
said
one.
that you supported it, but you actually haven't, because you did grant that police chief a contract that did not require him to live in the city. That same police chief is responsible for enforcing the residency requirement on the patrolmen that have less than 7 years of service with the city. And I don't know how we get the new people to abide by it when we don't force the person at the top to abide by it also. I think that the mayor has clearly been weak on residency. Recently, she requested a waiver for a secretary in City Hall because the secretary got married. If we're going to start waiving residency for every person that works in city government that gets married, we might as well just throw the whole thing out the window. The residency residency ordinance was approved by the voters by a 3-to-1 margin, and until it goes on a ballot and the voters speak differently, it's the obligation of the mayor to enforce it emphatically at all times.
We're following the law. She
Okay.
applied for a waiver. She's allowed to apply for a waiver. It was granted by the council. We're following the law.
At your request.
Okay, we're moving on. Question 8, round 3. Steve Bernard has a question for Mayor Balzotti. Steve?
Mayor Balzotti, what steps are you taking to address the unfunded pension liability, which stood at in excess of $693.6 million as of 6/30/2010? These benefits have already been earned by current and retired city employees. They are amortized over 30 years, but regardless, it seems improbable that we can handle this obligation without substantial help. The question is, where could that help possibly come from?
Actually, Steve, in terms of the retirement board does have a plan, and we are working towards a plan of fully funding the retirement benefits. It had been extended a few years as allowed by the state, but there is a plan to address retirement benefits, and we are making progress to fully fund them. Health insurance is another issue. Health insurance, we have reduced, by negotiating with the unions and changing the health plans, we have reduced what we are going to need to plan for in the future in terms of OPEB and health insurance benefits. And we have not developed a plan for that, and we need to develop a plan for that, and the CFO and I have talked about developing a plan for that. And it is going to be difficult because it is a lot of money, and you're correct, it is benefits that folks have already earned. But part of the assistance and help with that came from the unions who were willing to work with us to negotiate their health benefits, therefore reducing that prolonged cost.
Mr. Carpenter?
Sure. Well, the unions negotiated those concessions, and I'm glad that they did, but it was with the threat of the GIC hanging over their heads that they really didn't want, and it looks to me like we've given all that money back in pay raises this year anyhow. Steve, you're right, unfunded pension liabilities are an issue not just particular to Brockton. Many municipalities find themselves in this position, and I think it goes back to a point that I made earlier, and that is that we need to start developing additional sources of revenue coming into the city budget other than just state aid and property taxes.
Okay. Any follow-up? Steve?
What would the immediate burden to the taxpaying citizens be if over the next, let's say, 3 years, nothing is done?
Well, we pay that out now currently as part of the budget. So it's a fixed cost in the budget, retiree health insurance benefits. There is no way that you could divide that and do it over 3 years. You just couldn't, because it would be too much money. You'd have to do it over a longer period of time, like we're doing the retirement benefits, the actual retirement salaries that people are earning.
I think where I was leading is, does it precipitate an increase in taxes if we do not, in fact, address this issue?
Not currently. It could in the future, yes, but not currently. Not currently. But it will in the future.
Mr.
Well,
Carpenter, you have 1 minute now.
Well, according to the CFO, the mayor has already guaranteed us a tax increase for the next 2 years when she agreed to the firefighters contract, because the CFO told the city council that he could only certify the funds for this year and that the money would not be there for the second and third years of those projected raises without raising taxes. So I think our taxes have already been increased just with that $3.5 million settlement with the firefighters union.
Okay, there's room for one more follow-up if needed, otherwise we can keep moving. We have a few more questions we can go through. Okay. Morgan True, a question for Mr. Carpenter, 2 minutes.
Mr. Carpenter, your plan to hire new police, you've connected it to revenue from the power plant. And assuming, as you've mentioned tonight, that you're able to negotiate a deal where some of that revenue and tax money comes up front, there are still legal challenges to the power plant brought by people other than the city, residents and the town of West Bridgewater. What would you do in the interim to get more police on the streets? The legal challenges will take up most of your first term. What do you do in the interim to get police on the streets? And Mayor Balzotti, when it gets to you, you said throughout the campaign that we have 12 more police officers coming onto the staff, but beyond that, we're still below desirable staffing levels. What would you do to increase public safety and police on the streets in the next term?
Okay, so I'll try to address that. It comes to me first, Charlie?
Yes.
I believe, okay. I've talked about developing water, sewer, and electricity resources, and you're right. I would only do it if we negotiate an agreement that's in the best interest of the residents of the city. I've been very clear on that. And part of that would be, I would attempt to negotiate some upfront payments in the early years until the plant is up and running. So in an agreement, you could perhaps negotiate what would be paid out to the city in lieu of taxes and fees over the next 10 years and have those payments start immediately. So could you get all the full benefit of the plant in year one? No. Could it generate some revenue? Yes. Stonehill College, $200,000. I know the mayor says that's an enterprise account. Well, I want to revisit enterprise accounts. I want to look at the Towing Association. I think the Towing Association has the potential to pay for 4 police officers in year one. The reality with the staffing of our police department right now is these 12 officers that the mayor keeps referring to are simply replacements for open positions. There's no increase in staffing. There's, Mayor, 184, 185 positions budgeted. You've got 170 working. These are simply replacements for open positions. There has been zero growth of the manpower of the police department in the 4 years of the Balzotti administration.
Actually, that's not true, because 2 of the positions that are coming on are grant-funded positions, so they are brand new. So there has been growth, and there has been growth in the previous years. In terms of taking the money that you suggest from the power plant in the interim, you can't do that without the council support. The council has already, many of the council members have already expressed their opposition to the power plant. So it's going to be very difficult for you to work with the council to get them to accept that money. The way in which to get more police officers, as you suggested, is, in fact, to do the hard work that we're doing to improve the economic situation in the city, to create economic development, to bring in more business, to raise revenues. And also, if the state, our state aid right now is, for local aid, is been lower since fiscal year 2002. So for the last 12 years, it's been no more than it was in fiscal year 2002. The education side has grown tremendously, not on the city side. If we could get some support and some help from the state to return even a portion of that state aid, but in addition to that, to grow business, to grow the tax base, then we have the money and the funding that we can put police officers on. But in
Okay.
the interim, what we can do is apply for grant funding to
Okay.
do that, and that's what we do.
Mr. Carpenter, 1 minute.
170 plus 12 adds up to 182. I don't see where the increase in staffing is, Mayor. It's 182. I believe 184 was the number when you took over. So there has been no increase in the funding. The education budget has grown. It's grown because the student population is growing by 500 students per year for the last 4 years in a row. So naturally, it's going to, the education aid is going to increase. We're educating hundreds and hundreds more children each year than the previous year. And your other points, in terms of the state aid, per capita, per person, for our population, Brockton ranks 3rd in per capita state aid. We're getting more state aid per person than all but 2 other communities in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So I think this is a little bit of a cry in the dark to hope for all of a sudden we're going to move up to number 2 or number 1. I would think the 300 communities behind us would like to be getting per capita what we're receiving. So you know, we have to have a plan to develop resources to bring income in besides just property taxes.
Okay, I'm going to ask Morgan True and our panel, do you want to follow up to this question? The responses? Other panel members?
Thank you.
Okay. I'd like to, we're at that point where we can go through, if we move quickly, one more round of questions of the candidates desirous of doing that? One more round of questions, and then we'll do closing statements. Is that okay?
Mayor's call, sure.
Let's go.
I don't even know what the time is, so. It's like Vegas in here, you can't tell what the time is.
I'm working on it. That's out of order. Somebody mentioned a question on the Red Sox. Question 10, Monique Alleman, a question for Mayor Balzotti. If we could move this along now, I think each candidate could have what they want to say for this round and then have plenty of time for closing statements. So Monique?
Yes, thank you.
This is to Mayor Balzotti.
Mayor Balzotti, as my closing question, I'd like to know your vision for how you would like Brockton to be seen when your term of service as mayor has ended.
My term of service as mayor has ended. I want Brockton to be a community where people want to live, that they come to live, that they raise their family here, that they have employment opportunities here, that there's a thriving downtown, that business sectors throughout the city are thriving, that people feel safe and secure, and that young people have the opportunity to thrive and grow as I did, and that families have that same opportunity. I want my city, this city, and people want to be in this city just as I want to be in this city every single day and live here every single day. And I want them to see that and know that and have this be a destination that people choose and want to live in. And we're working towards that very hard each and every day.
Mr. Carpenter, 1 minute.
Well, the mayor often likes to allude to the fact that she graduated from Syracuse and came back to Brockton, and I think that's great that she did that. I won't say the exact number, Mayor, approximately 25 years ago.
30, I'm not
Okay,
ashamed.
all right. 30 years ago. The problem, I was trying to be polite.
Something new.
Oh, okay. The reality today is that our children are not coming back to the city of Brockton. When our children are graduating from college, they're leaving Brockton. They think the opportunities are better elsewhere, outside of Brockton. So I want to develop a Brockton that has a thriving economy, the streets are safe, that has our young people, the next generation, feeling as though that Brockton is the land of opportunity. They need to be coming back to the city. Right now, very few of our young people graduating from college are coming back to Brockton. Look around at other families that you know. Our kids are not coming back. They're leaving. They're not coming back.